Hi, this is part two of a culture of taking advantage of the law of equal and opposite reactions. Okay. So, this emotional content, right? Theory, not even a theory. I don't think it's a theory because I think it is valid and it is applicable to life. So, I don't think it's just purely theoretical. Philosophy, this philosophy, right? Also applies to social settings and social groups and political situations, right? If the government decides to do something crazy, like let's say roll out digital IDs, right, which are going to tether us to the state, whether we like it or not, like you are now tracked digitally and you can't have any anonymous cash transactions, for example, you can't have any anonymous travel. That is an undermining of our freedom to privacy and to the right to disappear. We should all have a right to just disappear. Why must we always be tracked? Every purchase you make, because now the digital ID is going to be linked to your digital bank account. So now every purchase you make, some of them want to even go completely cashless in the societies. Instead of being angry only and being like in a way defeated, right, by the state that's doing this thing, we can also take that emotional content and say, okay, guys, as we can see, the political, social, economics institutions of this world of ours are not geared towards our well-being. Okay, they are literally screwing us over at every turn, because why? They need to keep us as a supply of human emotion and human labor and voting fodder to legitimize the political institutions that are so corrupt, etc. You know, they need us to feed these social institutions that keep our minds enslaved to ideas that are completely disempowering. So here we are all angry about this mooted digital ID. We can take that emotional content and say we're going to create our own systems. We can take that emotional content and say, what is free will and how do we galvanize our free will? How do we galvanize our sovereignty that is given to us by our creator to not counter this in the same arena and on the same terms that it was presented to us, but to create new arenas for ourselves that exist outside of these arenas. Because this is the thing. If you're going to try and counter an oppressive system using its systems, it's not going to work. That's why you're never going to, this political system of voting is never going to deliver the freedom and the future of peace and prosperity that we all want for ourselves and our children and our grandchildren. It's never going to happen. We're going to have to create new systems. It's a fact. Economic reform is not going to happen in this economic system that exists with central banks. Because as that other dude said, I can't remember who it was, but he said, give me control of a country's money and I don't care who makes the laws. It's a fact. It's a fact. If they want to screw with a country, they'll just mess up with the money supply of a country. Look at what happens in Zimbabwe. Yes, Mugabe signed multilateral agreements that said he was going to uphold private property rights, and if he violated them, he would be punished with sanctions. And so that's what happened, right? But in the process, that currency was devalued. Okay, it's not like everything just happened like a domino effect from the sanctions, you know. A lot was done to manipulate that currency, to cause pain. The sanctions had to do with, went hand in hand with currency manipulation. Same thing happened in Venezuela, you know. So I think you're not going to reform an economic system based on central banks who create money out of thin air based on the fiat currency system. You're always going to lose. It's like how they say in gambling houses, the house always wins. If you're a gambler, you are always going to lose more than you win. That's a fact. Unless you're like a very disciplined gambler, and not many of those, the house always wins. The house makes, otherwise, why would casinos exist if they were just there to dish out free money? No, they make money. They make a whole bunch of money, and people's lives are destroyed. I'm not going to say the casinos destroy people's lives. People choose to go and gamble, and then sometimes they end up losing everything, their houses, their cars, it's horrific. They have to take their kids out of school. Bad stuff happens, So what I'm trying to say is, if you are going to seek to reform a system which is designed by people who have your enslavement in heart, you're not going to succeed. You're always going to lose. Okay, the house always wins. Same with the political system. Why on earth do you have to spend money on political campaigns to get into office if your goal is to help people? Just help people. If you want to help people, help them. Get up and help them. You know what I'm saying? But the reality is that they are paying to get into office, because once people are in office, they have access to all sorts of perks that allow them to become very wealthy people. Okay, very influential people, very highly connected people. So when they get out of there, their businesses flourish because they've got all these networks going on. Okay, so you're paying, it's like buying a whole bunch of lottery tickets to ensure that you win the lottery. You know what I'm saying? They're hedging their bets. The more money you spend on elections, the more votes you're able to garner, the more chance you have to get into the highest office, which affords you all these opportunities. So sadly, it's really not about helping people. Similarly, with many of the social institutions you have, educational, spiritual, cultural institutions, these are about maintaining the worldview that persists. They normalize the economic and political system. They make it seem like the political and economic system are all we've ever had. They make it seem like human beings are just prone to take advantage of each other, are just prone to manipulate and exploit each other, are just prone to deceive each other. That's not a fact. There's some people who don't do that. Go to Bhutan, that country where gross national happiness is how they measure their success. And other countries like, some Scandinavian countries, whatever, it's not a given that humans are out to screw each other. But many of these social and cultural institutions we have make it seem like that's how it is. So what I'm saying is, on a social level, when things happen that screw us over and piss us off and make us angry and indignant, we need to start doing more than going out into the streets and marching and screaming and shouting and then sometimes looting things. And if you look at the looting that happened in July 2021, it shows you that people have got a lot of energy and a lot of organizational capacity. It's just that unfortunately we use it for the wrong things or for instant gratification. But what if we had to take that same capacity and the emotional content of our dissatisfaction with the system and turn it into creating durable institutions, social and cultural, economic and political institutions within our different locales that would then drive meaningful and long-term change for us, that move beyond, because, we feel like these systems that exist in the world are beyond reproach in terms of our ability to root them out for the nonsense that they are and start over. No, go back 200 years. These things were not there. And yet there were thriving civilizations that were functional and that were feeding people. You know what I'm saying? Maybe they weren't as high tech, but people were living. Okay. So what I'm saying is, humans, we need to stop letting ourselves be dumbed down to believe that this is the best it's ever going to be or has ever been. It's not. It can't be. It can't be if there's so much inequality. It can't be when some people have too much food that they have to throw it away, and there's children who have to look in dumpsters for food because they don't have money to buy food, because their society has lost the capacity to grow its own food, when 200 years ago, that's all people ate, was food that they grew themselves and maybe that they bartered with someone else. So the capacity for self-reliance and self-development outside of any imposed system from the outside exists within us, So I really would like to start the conversation and us to talk about how do we turn our emotional content of indignation at the injustices into energy to create new systems that will help us to thrive as human beings. Thank you.